What do you think you're doing, Gloria? A married woman going to work? Have you no shame? I froze, my hands still on the doorknob, as Margaret's shrill voice pierced the morning calm. My mother-in-law stood in our driveway, arms crossed, her disapproving glare burning holes through my crisp blazer. "Good morning to you too, Margaret," I managed, forcing a smile. "I didn't expect to see you this early." "Clearly," she sniffed, eyeing my briefcase. "I thought I'd drop by to make sure my son was being properly cared for. But here you are, abandoning your duties." Before I could respond, Andy appeared behind me, adjusting his tie. "Mom? What are you doing here?" Margaret's face softened instantly. "Andy, darling. I was just telling Gloria how a wife should be home, taking care of her husband." I turned to Andy, silently pleading for support. He glanced between us, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. "Well, Gloria's job is important to her, Mom. And to us." "Important?" Margaret scoffed. "More important than being a proper wife?" Andy's shoulders slumped. "I've got to get to work. We'll talk later, okay?" He pecked my cheek and hurried to his car, leaving me alone with the dragon lady. As Andy's car disappeared down the street, Margaret advanced on me. "Listen here, Missy. I won't stand by and watch you neglect my son. It's time you learned your place." Anger flared in my chest. "My place is wherever I choose it to be, Margaret. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting to attend." I strode past her, my heels clicking defiantly on the driveway. As I started my car, I caught sight of Margaret's furious face in the rearview mirror. This battle was far from over, and for the first time since marrying Andy, I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. I slammed the front door shut, kicking off my heels with a frustrated groan. Another day, another surprise visit from Margaret. This time, she'd rearranged my entire kitchen, claiming it was more efficient. I collapsed onto the couch, massaging my temples. "Rough day?" Andy's voice startled me. He stood in the doorway, loosening his tie. "Your mother," I sighed. "Again." Andy's face fell. "What did she do this time?" I recounted Margaret's latest intrusion, watching Andy's expression shift from concern to guilt. "I'm sorry, Gloria. I'll talk to her, I promise." "Like you promised last week? And the week before?" I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. "When are you going to stand up to her, Andy?" He sat beside me, shoulders slumped. "It's not that simple. You don't understand, Dash." "Then help me understand." I snapped. "Because right now, all I see is you letting your mother run our lives." Andy flinched, and suddenly, I was transported back to our first date. His shy smile, his gentle nature, it was what had drawn me to him. After a string of controlling, domineering boyfriends, Andy's kindness had been a breath of fresh air. But now, that same passivity was tearing us apart. "I love you, Gloria," Andy said softly. "But she's my mother. I can't just dash." "Can't what?" "Tell her to respect our boundaries? To treat me like an adult?" I stood up, pacing the room. "Do you know what she said today? That if I keep working, I'm neglecting you. That I'm a failure as a wife." Andy's face paled. "She shouldn't have said that. But she did. And you weren't here to defend me." Again. I turned to face him, my heart pounding. "I need you on my side, Andy. I need you to be my partner." He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "I am on your side, Gloria. Always." "Then prove it," I challenged. "Next time she shows up unannounced, you tell her it's not okay. You set boundaries." Andy's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. I'll try." But as I looked into his eyes, I saw the doubt, the fear. And for the first time since we'd said, "I do," I wondered if love alone would be enough to weather this storm. I woke to the sound of clattering dishes and hushed voices. Groaning, I glanced at the clock. 6:30 a.m. Who on earth was in our kitchen at this hour? As I crept down the stairs, I heard Andy's nervous whisper, "Mom, please. Gloria will be up soon." My blood ran cold. "Margaret." Again. I burst into the kitchen, startling them both. "What's going on here?" Margaret beamed, all false sweetness. "Good morning, dear. I thought I'd come by and show Andy how to properly prepare a nutritious breakfast for his hardworking wife." I glared at Andy, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "And you let her in? After our talk last night?" She had a key," he mumbled. "A key?" I whirled on Margaret. "How did you get a key to our house?" She waved dismissively. "Oh, Andy gave it to me ages ago. For emergencies, you understand." My vision blurred with anger. "This isn't an emergency, Margaret. This is an invasion of privacy." "Now, Gloria," Margaret started, but I cut her off. "No, I've had enough." I turned to Andy. "We agreed you'd set boundaries. This ends now." Andy's eyes darted between us. "Gloria, please. Can't we just dash?" "Choose, Andy," I said, my voice shaking. "Right now, your mother's meddling or our marriage." The silence that followed was deafening. Margaret's face turned an alarming shade of red. "How dare you? After everything I've done for this family, dash. You've done nothing but try to control us," I snapped. "Andy, I'm serious. If you don't put a stop to this now, I'm leaving." Andy's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. He looked at his mother, then back at me. "Mom," he said softly, "I think you should go." Margaret gasped. "Andrew, you can't possibly dash." "Please, Mom," Andy said, his voice stronger now. "Gloria's right. We need our space." I watched, stunned, as Andy gently but firmly guided his protesting mother to the door. As it closed behind her, he turned to me, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should have done that a long time ago." I wanted to be angry, to remind him of all the times he'd failed to stand up for me. But seeing the pain and resolve on his face, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could make this work after all. But as Andy pulled me into a hug, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. Margaret wouldn't give up so easily, and our battle was only just beginning. I stared at the pregnancy test in disbelief, my heart racing. 2 pink lines. Twins. How was this possible? "Gloria?" Andy's voice called from downstairs. "You okay up there?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Coming." As I descended the stairs, Andy's face lit up with concern. "What's wrong?" "You look pale." "I'm pregnant," I blurted out. "With twins." Andy's jaw dropped, then a grin spread across his face. He swept me into a hug, laughing joyously. "That's amazing! We're going to be parents." For a moment, I let myself get caught up in his excitement. But reality quickly set in. "Andy, what about work? My career?" His smile faltered. "Well, I'm sure we can figure something out. Maybe you could dash." The doorbell interrupted us. Andy opened it, revealing Margaret's beaming face. "I thought I heard good news." "Congratulations, darlings." My stomach dropped. How did she always know? Margaret bustled in, already talking a mile a minute. "Oh, Gloria, this changes everything. You'll need to quit that job of yours, of course. A mother's place is in the home, especially with twins." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Excuse me?" "Well, you can't possibly think of working now," Margaret scoffed. "Those babies will need you full-time." I looked to Andy, silently pleading for support. He shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, maybe we should discuss this later, dash." "Nonsense," Margaret declared. "There's so much to plan. I'll help, of course. I'll be over every day to teach Gloria how to be a proper mother." Something inside me snapped. "No," I said firmly. "You won't." Margaret blinked, taken aback. "I beg your pardon?" I said no. I repeated, my voice growing stronger. "I'm not quitting my job. I'm not becoming a full-time housewife. And you will not be coming over every day." Margaret's face turned an alarming shade of red. "Andrew, are you going to let her speak to me like this?" Andy looked between us, clearly torn, but for once he stood his ground. "Mom, Gloria's right. This is our decision to make." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "I see. Well, if that's how you feel, don't come crying to me when your marriage falls apart because your wife cares more about her career than her family." As she stormed out, slamming the door behind her, I turned to Andy. "This isn't over, is it?" He shook his head, looking weary. "No, it's not. But we're in this together, right?" I nodded, placing a hand on my stomach. Whatever came next, we'd face it as a family, our family. The tension in the room was palpable as Margaret's words hung in the air. It's time to choose, Gloria. Your career or your family. I stood there, stunned, one hand protectively cradling my growing belly. That's not a choice you get to make for me, Margaret. She turned to Andy, her eyes blazing. Andrew, tell your wife that if she doesn't quit her job and become a proper housewife, I'll make sure you divorce her. I won't have my grandchildren raised by a neglectful mother. Andy's face paled. Mom, you can't be serious, Dash. I've never been more serious, Margaret snapped. It's time you put your foot down, son. I looked at Andy, silently pleading for him to stand up to his mother. But I saw the conflict in his eyes, the way he shrank under her gaze. Andy, I whispered, my voice breaking. Please. He swallowed hard, looking between us. I think we all need to calm down and think about this rationally. Margaret's triumphant smile made my blood boil. There's nothing to think about. Gloria, you have until the end of the week to decide. Your career or your family. Choose wisely. As she swept out of the room, I turned to Andy, tears stinging my eyes. How could you let her say those things? How could you not defend me? Andy reached for me, but I stepped back. Gloria, I'm sorry. I don't know how to handle her. Maybe if we give her some time, Dash. Time? I laughed bitterly. She's given me an ultimatum, Andy. And you're still trying to placate her. He ran a hand through his hair, looking lost. What do you want me to do? I want you to choose me, I shouted, surprising us both. I want you to stand up to her, to tell her she can't control our lives anymore. Andy's silence spoke volumes. I felt something break inside me. I can't do this anymore, I whispered. I can't keep fighting both of you. What are you saying? Andy asked, his voice trembling. I took a deep breath, making a decision that would change everything. I think I need to stay with my parents for a while, until you figure out where your loyalties lie. Andy's face crumpled. Gloria, please, Dash. But I was already moving, grabbing my keys and heading for the door. As I stepped outside, I felt a mix of fear and determination. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain. I wouldn't let anyone, not even Margaret, dictate the course of my life or the lives of my unborn children. The hospital room was a blur of activity as I gripped Andy's hand, pain searing through my body. They're coming, I gasped, sweat beading on my forehead. Andy's face was a mix of excitement and terror. You're doing great, Gloria. Just breathe. Hours later, exhausted but elated, I held our twins, a boy and a girl. Andy's eyes shimmered with tears as he gazed at our children. For a moment, everything felt perfect. Then the door burst open, and Margaret swept in. My grandbabies, she cooed, reaching for them. I instinctively pulled back, a surge of protectiveness overwhelming me. Margaret, please. We're not ready for visitors yet. Her face darkened. Don't be ridiculous, Gloria. I'm family. Andy stepped forward, surprising us both. Mom, Gloria's right. We need some time alone. Margaret's eyes narrowed. Andrew, surely you don't mean Dash. I do, Andy said firmly. Please, Mom. We'll call you later. As Margaret stormed out, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe Andy was finally ready to stand up to her. But our peace was short-lived. Over the next few weeks, Margaret's interference escalated. She showed up unannounced, criticized our parenting, and constantly pushed me to quit my job. The final straw came when I returned from a short work call to find Margaret trying to convince Andy to let her move in to help. Absolutely not, I said, my voice shaking with anger. Margaret turned on me. You ungrateful girl. After everything I've done, Dash. Everything you've done? I exploded. You've done nothing but try to control us since day one. Andy stood frozen, looking between us. I could see the conflict in his eyes, and my heart sank. He was still torn. Andy, I pleaded, you have to choose.
Right now.
It's her or us. The silence that followed was deafening. Margaret smirked, clearly expecting Andy to side with her as he always had. But then Andy straightened, a resolve I'd never seen before settling over his features. Mom, he said quietly, I think you should leave. Margaret gasped. What? You heard me, Andy continued, his voice growing stronger.
Leave.
And don't come back until you can respect our choices and our family. As Margaret's face contorted with rage, I felt a mix of relief and trepidation. This was the moment we'd been building towards, the final confrontation we couldn't avoid. You'll regret this, Margaret hissed, grabbing her purse. Both of you. As she slammed the door behind her, I turned to Andy, my heart pounding. Did you mean it? I whispered. Andy pulled me close, our babies nestled between us.
Every word, he said.
It's time we stood together. I closed my eyes, savoring the moment, but knowing that Margaret wouldn't give up without a fight. The real battle was just beginning. The weeks following Andy's confrontation with Margaret were surprisingly peaceful. We settled into a rhythm with the twins, and I started preparing for my return to work. Andy had been incredibly supportive, helping with night feedings and diaper changes. It felt like we were finally on the same page. Then came the bombshell. Gloria, Andy said one evening, his voice trembling. My brother called. Mom's in the hospital. My heart sank. What happened? Stress-induced heart attack, he replied. They're saying it's serious. The guilt in his eyes was unmistakable. I knew what he was thinking, that our estrangement had caused this. We should visit her, I said softly, surprising myself. At the hospital, Margaret looked small and frail, a far cry from the domineering woman I knew. When she saw us, her eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, she whispered. I've been terrible to you both. I felt a mix of emotions, pity, anger, and a reluctant hope that maybe, just maybe, this could be a turning point. But as Margaret recovered, so did her controlling nature. She began making subtle digs about my impending return to work, implying that Andy was struggling with the babies in my absence. The final straw came when I overheard her on the phone, plotting with Andy's sister to convince him that I was neglecting our family. Furious, I confronted her. Enough, Margaret. This ends now. Her mask of contrition fell away. You ungrateful girl. After everything I've done, what you've done is try to destroy my marriage and my career, I snapped. But it stops here. I turned to Andy, who had entered the room. It's time to choose, Andy. Once and for all. Your mother or your family.
Andy looked between us, conflict clear on his face. But then he straightened, resolve settling over his features. Mom, he said firmly, we're leaving. And we won't be back until you can respect our choices. As we walked out, Margaret's angry shouts echoing behind us, I felt a mix of triumph and trepidation. We'd won this battle, but the war was far from over. What now? I asked Andy as we drove home. He reached for my hand. Now we start fresh. Together. I nodded, a plan forming in my mind. It was time to reveal my own secret, the startup I'd been quietly developing. A company that would allow me to balance my career and family on my own terms. As we pulled into our driveway, I took a deep breath. This was it, the moment that would define our future. I just hoped Andy was ready for one more surprise. As I stood in our new living room, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. The twins were napping in their new nursery, and Andy was out picking up dinner. Our fresh start was finally here. The doorbell rang, shattering the quiet. My heart raced as I opened the door to find Margaret standing there, looking smaller and older than I remembered. Gloria, she said softly. May I come in? I hesitated, then nodded, steeling myself for another confrontation. Margaret's eyes darted around the room, taking in the boxes and the photos of our family already adorning the walls. It's lovely, she murmured. What do you want, Margaret? I asked, my voice steady. She took a deep breath. I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I owe you an apology. Both of you. I blinked, caught off guard. I appreciate that, but please, she interrupted. Let me finish. I was wrong. About everything. I see now how much Andy loves you, how happy you make him. And those beautiful grandchildren. Her voice cracked. I almost lost it all because of my stubbornness. Just then, Andy walked in, freezing at the sight of his mother. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Margaret turned to him, tears in her eyes. "I'm here to make amends if you'll let me." I watched as Andy's face softened. He looked at me, silently asking for my opinion. In that moment, I saw the strength in him that I'd always known was there. "We can try," I said carefully. "But there need to be boundaries." Margaret nodded eagerly. "Of course. Anything." As we sat down to talk, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. It wouldn't be easy, but we were moving forward. Later that night, as Andy and I lay in bed, our twins sleeping peacefully nearby, I turned to him. "I have something to tell you," I said, my heart pounding. "I've been working on a startup. A company that will allow me to work from home, be with the kids, and still pursue my career." Andy's face lit up. "Gloria, that's amazing. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I smiled, relief washing over me. "I wasn't sure how you'd react. But now I see we're in this together, aren't we?" He pulled me close. "Always," he whispered. As I drifted off to sleep, I marveled at how far we'd come. We'd faced our challenges, stood our ground, and emerged stronger. Our story wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And as I looked to the future, I knew that whatever came our way, we'd face it side by side, our love and determination carrying us through.